boutique assistant gives her last money to an old beggar and gets fired for it, she unknowingly wins the heart of a powerful billionaire family and is pulled into a storm of love, envy, and class war that will transform her life forever. Alice walked into the high-end fashion boutique, her heart heavy but her face carrying a tired smile. She had been working here for months, but every day felt like a battle. Her manager, Maria, treated her more like a servant than a sales assistant. Whenever Alice made a sale, Maria found a way to take her commission, leaving her with nothing on most days. Alice was sent to run errands instead of actually selling. She picked up dry cleaning, fetched coffee, and even cleaned the stock room while the other workers attended to wealthy customers. "You should be grateful," Maria would sneer. "You don't belong here anyway." The senior staff weren't any better. They stole her clients, laughed at her simple clothes, and gave her the hardest tasks. But Alice never complained. She needed this job. One afternoon, as Alice carefully folded some expensive dresses, the glass door swung open. An old woman walked in. Her clothes were worn out, her shoes had holes, and her hair was messy. The other workers wrinkled their noses in disgust. "Ma'am, you can't be here," one of them sneered. "This is a luxury store." The old woman smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "I just want to look around," she said softly. Maria walked over, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She looked her up and down, then snorted. "We don't serve people like you," she said. "This is a boutique for high-class clients, not beggars." The other workers laughed cruelly. Alice's heart ached. She knew what it felt like to be looked down on. She quickly walked over and gently touched the old woman's arm. "Ma'am, would you like some water?" she asked kindly. The old woman's eyes lit up. That would be nice. Alice ignored the stares and whispers of her colleagues as she brought her a cold glass of water. She helped her sit down and smiled. "Take your time, ma'am," she said warmly. "Let me know if you need help." The old woman touched her hand gently. Her skin was rough, full of wrinkles. She looked at her like she was the first kind person she had met in a long time. "Good things happen to good people," she whispered. "Remember that, my dear." Alice didn't know why, but her words touched her heart. Mrs. Ronald finished her water and smiled at Alice, her wrinkled hands resting on the table. "You are a kind girl," she said warmly. "Help me pick out 10 luxury outfits." Alice blinked in surprise. 10? "Yes," she nodded. "I want the best, the finest suits, silk shirts, and designer shoes." Alice's heart raced with excitement. This could be her biggest sale ever. Maybe Maria would finally see her worth. Maybe today was her lucky day. She quickly began selecting the most elegant suits, carefully choosing pieces that matched Mrs. Ronald's frame. She adjusted collars, picked silk ties, and even found shoes that would complement her new look. The other workers stood at a distance, whispering among themselves. "That girl is such a fool," one of them snickered. "She's clearly broke," another laughed. Maria folded her arms and watched with an amused smirk. "Let's see how this turns out," she murmured. After nearly an hour, Alice laid out the final selection. "Ma'am, I think these will look great on you," she said cheerfully. Mrs. Ronald clapped her hands together. "I'll take them all." Alice beamed with joy. "That will be $225,000, ma'am," she said excitedly. The room fell silent. The other employees raised their eyebrows. Maria smirked. Mrs. Ronald patted her pockets, then chuckled softly. "Oh dear," she sighed. "I don't have any money on me." Alice's smile froze. The boutique erupted into laughter. "Are you kidding me?" one of the senior staff shrieked. "You wasted all that time on a poor old beggar." Maria's eyes gleamed with amusement. She slowly walked toward Alice, her expensive perfume filling the air. "You really are stupid, aren't you?" Maria sneered. "You actually thought this old fool could afford those clothes." Alice turned to Mrs. Ronald. "Ma'am, you don't have any money?" Mrs. Ronald sighed. "I do, but it's with my grandson. He's very rich. I just need to find him." Maria burst into laughter. Her grandson? Oh, how convenient. She turned to the other workers. "You hear that, ladies? This homeless old woman is looking for her rich grandson." The staff howled with laughter, their voices filled with mockery. Alice felt her face burn with embarrassment, but she refused to look away from Mrs. Ronald's sad eyes. Instead of yelling or arguing, she simply smiled softly. "It's okay, Mum," she said gently. "Don't worry about it." The laughter stopped. Maria narrowed her eyes. "Excuse me? Are you really going to stand here and act like a fool?" Alice ignored her. "Here, ma'am," she said softly, pressing the money into her hands. "At least take this for a taxi home." Mrs. Ronald stared at her in shock. Her hands trembled as she took the money. "You are a rare soul," she whispered. Maria scoffed and took a step closer, her voice sharp and cold. "I warned you, Alice," she said. "I told you not to bring filth into this boutique, but you didn't listen. Aura Group has a class to maintain. This store is a part of the most exclusive fashion empire, and we cannot bring down our standards by associating with street people." She shook her head in disgust. "You are ruining our image, Alice, and for that you're fired. Get out of my store." Alice took a deep breath, blinking back tears. She picked up her bag, turned on her heels, and walked out of the store without another word. She didn't know why, but something felt different. As she disappeared down the street, Mrs. Ronald stood there, watching her leave with a knowing smile. She had no idea her life was about to change forever. As Alice walked out of the boutique, her heart heavy, Mrs. Ronald turned to Maria, her face calm but firm. "You should not judge people based on their appearance," she said softly. "Kindness is more valuable than expensive clothes." Maria rolled her eyes. "Oh, please spare me the lecture, old woman." She crossed her arms and smirked. "Do you know where you are? Aura Group is a billion-dollar fashion empire. This boutique serves only the elite. People like you do not belong here." Mrs. Ronald shook her head. "Wealth is not just about money, young lady. It is about the heart." Maria's face darkened with anger. "That's it! Security!" Two security guards rushed forward. "Get this poor old woman out of my store," Maria ordered. "She has no right to stand here and lecture me." The guards grabbed Mrs. Ronald's arms, but she simply chuckled. "There is no need for force, my dear. I am leaving." With one last glance at Maria, she walked out of the boutique, stepping into the bright afternoon sun. Maria smirked in victory while the other staff laughed. Little did she know, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Mrs. Ronald halted a taxi and got inside, giving the driver her address. As the car moved through the busy city streets, she looked out of the window, her mind filled with thoughts. She had seen true kindness today, and she had seen true cruelty. When the taxi pulled up in front of a massive estate, the driver's eyes widened in shock. "Mum? This is your house?" the driver stammered. Mrs. Ronald only smiled and handed him the fare. She stepped out and walked through the golden gates of her mansion. Inside, everything was luxurious. Marble floors, golden chandeliers, and walls decorated with famous paintings. At the center of the grand living room stood James Ronald, the powerful CEO of Aura Group. Handsome, sharp-eyed, and dressed in an expensive suit, he looked every bit the billionaire he was. "Grandmother," James's deep voice filled the room as he rushed forward. "Where have you been? You were gone for hours." Mrs. Ronald smiled. "I was testing the world, my boy, and I met a very kind soul." James frowned. "Testing the world?" Mrs. Ronald sighed and told him everything. How she had entered the boutique, how the staff had mocked her, and how Alice was the only one who treated her with kindness. When she finished, James's expression turned cold. "They treated you like that?" His jaw clenched. "They threw you out of our store." His grandmother nodded. James's hands tightened into fists. "That boutique belongs to Aura Group. They work for me. How dare they throw out my grandmother?" Mrs. Ronald placed a hand on her grandson's arm, her voice calm. "The girl, she was different. She was kind. She must be rewarded." James turned to his assistant, a sharp-dressed man named Thomas. "Get me the security footage from the boutique," he ordered. Minutes later, James sat in his private office, watching the footage on a large screen. He saw everything. Alice ignored the insults, still treating her with respect. Alice taking out her own money and giving it to her. James leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "Find her," he said at last. Thomas, his assistant, hesitated. "Sir, find this woman?" "I want to know everything about her," James repeated, his voice firm. "I want to see her." Thomas nodded and hurried out. James sat alone in his office, watching the screen once more. A kind and innocent girl. Who was she? Alice walked slowly down the street, her feet aching, her heart heavy. She was jobless, with no idea where her next meal would come from. She had given her last money to Mrs. Ronald, and now she had nothing. The afternoon sun burned her skin as she clutched her bag tightly. She took a deep breath, trying not to cry. Then suddenly a black luxury car rolled to a smooth stop beside her. Alice froze. The car was sleek, polished, and more expensive than anything she had ever seen up close. The tinted window rolled down, and a man in a sharp suit leaned out. "Miss Alice?" he asked, his voice professional and firm. Alice's heart pounded. "Yes." The man smiled politely. "My name is Thomas. I am the personal assistant to Mr. James Ronald, CEO of Aura Group." Alice's breath caught in her throat. "Aura Group?" Thomas continued. "My employer would like to meet you. Please come with me." Alice stared in shock. This had to be a scam. Why would the CEO of a billion-dollar company want to see her? She took a step back. I think you have the wrong person." Thomas shook his head. "No, we don't. Mrs. Ronald has sent me personally to bring you to her estate. You will be perfectly safe." Alice hesitated, her mind racing. This was crazy. It made no sense, and yet something inside her whispered, "Go." She swallowed hard, then finally nodded. "Okay." Thomas opened the car door, and Alice slid into the softest leather seat she had ever felt. As the car pulled away, she nervously clutched her bag, staring out the window. This was the biggest risk of her life. The moment the car passed through the golden gates, Alice's eyes widened in shock. The mansion before her was massive, the kind of place she had only seen in movies. The driveway stretched endlessly, leading to a grand estate with towering marble pillars and glowing chandeliers. As the car stopped, uniformed staff rushed forward to open the door for her. Alice stepped out, feeling like she had entered another world. "Please, this way," Thomas said, guiding her toward the grand entrance. Everything was polished, extravagant, perfect. And then she saw him. At the top of the marble staircase, standing tall and elegant, was James Ronald. Alice froze in place. She had only ever seen his face in magazines and business articles, but in real life, he was even more sophisticated, more powerful looking, more breathtakingly handsome than she had imagined. Everyone in the city knew that name. James Ronald. The youngest billionaire, the most successful CEO, the man every woman dreamed of marrying. Alice suddenly remembered Maria's words at work. "If I ever meet James Ronald," Maria had once said, "I'll make sure he falls in love with me. He's the perfect man, rich, powerful, and handsome." And now, he was standing right in front of her. Alice felt like she was in a dream. James's gaze was sharp, but his lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Miss Alice," he said smoothly, "I'm James Ronald." Alice forced herself to breathe. I'm Alice," she said nervously. James's smile widened just slightly, as if he found her reaction amusing. Then suddenly, "Ah, there she is." Alice turned quickly, and her eyes lit up. Mrs. Ronald stood at the bottom of the stairs, her face glowing with happiness. "Alice, my dear," she said warmly, "thank you for coming." Alice smiled in relief. You live here?" The old woman chuckled deeply. "Oh yes, my dear, I'm not as poor as I seemed, am I?" Alice felt her knees go weak. This wealthy, powerful family, and she had unknowingly helped its grandmother. She suddenly felt so small in this grand place. Mrs. Ronald turned to James and said firmly, "This is the kind of woman you should marry." Alice gasped. She laughed shyly, waving her hands. "Oh no, that's not..." But when she looked at James, she froze. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't smirking. He was just staring at her, a long, silent stare, and for some reason it made Alice's heart race. Alice sat in the grand living room of the Ronald mansion, feeling completely out of place. The soft glow of the chandelier, the expensive velvet couch beneath her, and the quiet hum of servants moving about. It all felt unreal. Across from her, James Ronald sat with his usual unreadable expression. "I ran a background check on you," he said calmly. Alice's heart skipped a beat. What? James leaned back in his chair. I wanted to know more about the girl who gave my grandmother her last money, and I found out something interesting. Alice swallowed hard. What? What did you find out? James's gaze softened, just slightly. You live alone. No family, no one to support you. His voice wasn't mocking or pitying, just a statement of fact. Alice looked down, gripping her dress. He was right. She had been on her own for a long time, but hearing it said aloud hurt. James sighed and gestured to Thomas, his assistant. Bring them in, he said. Within moments, servants entered the room carrying multiple boxes, large, elegant, wrapped in gold ribbons. Alice's eyes widened. What is this? A thank you gift, James said simply, for helping my grandmother. One servant opened a box, revealing designer clothes, silk dresses, and custom-made shoes. Another opened a second box. It was a luxury handbag worth more than Alice's yearly salary, and then Thomas stepped forward, holding a small black box. Alice's breath caught as he flipped it open. Inside was a set of car keys. A Rolls-Royce, James said. It's yours. Alice's jaw dropped. What? No, I can't accept this. James raised an eyebrow. Why not? Alice shook her head firmly. I didn't help Mrs. Ronald because I wanted anything in return. I did it because it was the right thing to do. James stared at her, as if trying to understand her. You're refusing a Rolls-Royce? He asked, as if no one had ever done that before. Alice nodded. Yes. James was silent for a long moment. Then to her surprise, he smiled. A small, genuine smile. You're different, he murmured. Mrs. Ronald, who had been quietly watching, suddenly clapped her hands. Then if you won't accept the gifts, she said, her voice warm, at least stay with us for a while. Alice's head snapped up. Stay here? Yes. The old woman nodded eagerly. I enjoy your company. I want you to stay in the mansion for a little while. Keep me company, child. Alice hesitated. The idea of living in this grand place felt overwhelming, but the old woman's eyes pleaded with kindness, and in the end, she couldn't say no. Days later, Alice had barely adjusted to life in the mansion when trouble arrived. A sleek red convertible sped through the gates, the engine roaring. The second it stopped, a woman in designer heels stepped out, her lips pursed in irritation. Chloe. Alice didn't know her, but the moment Chloe's icy gaze landed on her, she knew exactly what was coming. Chloe stormed into the mansion, her heels clicking loudly against the marble floor. James, she called out, her voice filled with fake sweetness. James walked in, adjusting the cuff of his designer suit. His expression remained cool. Chloe. Chloe's sharp eyes flickered toward Alice, and instantly her face twisted into disgust. And who is this? She asked, her voice dripping with venom. Before Alice could speak, Mrs. Ronald smiled cheerfully. This is Alice, my dear guest. Chloe laughed coldly. Guest? In this mansion? Are you serious? She turned back to James. James, who is she really? A maid? Some social climber trying to get close to you? Alice's hands clenched, but before she could defend herself, James spoke first. She is none of those things, he said, his voice firm. She is our guest, and you will show her respect. Chloe froze, her lips parting in shock. Alice stared at James in surprise. Chloe quickly composed herself, flipping her hair. Respect? James, open your eyes. She is poor. She doesn't belong here. James's jaw tightened. And yet, she is here. Chloe crossed her arms, a fake smile on her lips. Let me guess. She's pretending to be innocent while planning to steal your money. Alice finally spoke. I am not here for anyone's money. Chloe scoffed. Oh, please. I've seen women like you before. You act humble, but the moment a rich man notices you, suddenly you're in love. Alice's face burned, but before she could reply, James stepped forward. His expression was dangerous. Now that's enough, Chloe. Chloe blinked. What? I said that's enough. His voice was calm but cold. Alice is Grandma's guest. You will not insult her again. Chloe's mouth opened and closed, completely shocked. She had expected James to agree with her. She had expected him to throw Alice out. But instead he was defending her. And she knew one thing for sure. This girl was a threat. Chloe had always known that James wasn't in love with her, but she didn't care, as long as he gave her money to maintain her luxury lifestyle. She was fine with it. The designer bags, the first-class vacations, the expensive jewelry, that was all that mattered. And now some low-life girl was ruining everything. Chloe wasn't about to sit still and watch her perfect arrangement slip away. No, she would get rid of Alice one way or another. She angrily stormed out of the house. Meanwhile, in the quiet of her private room, Mrs. Ronald sat comfortably in her large armchair, sipping tea. Across from her stood James, his arms crossed. "Grandmother, why did you call me here?" Mrs. Ronald set her cup down and looked her grandson in the eye. "That girl, Chloe," she said firmly. "She's not the one for you." James sighed. "You've said this before. And I'll say it again," Mrs. Ronald cut him off. "If you marry a woman like her, you'll regret it for life." James exhaled, rubbing his temple. "Grandmother, I have no plans to marry Chloe or anyone else for that matter." Mrs. Ronald nodded approvingly. "Good. Because a woman like that only loves money, and the day things are no longer smooth sailing, she will leave you." James said nothing, but his mind was full of thoughts about Alice. The next morning, Alice found Mrs. Ronald and James in the breakfast lounge. She cleared her throat softly. Grandma Ronald? Mr. James? There is something I've been meaning to tell you." Both looked at her. I need to find a job," she said hesitantly. "I've been here for days, and I can't just stay for free. I need to earn my own money." James raised an eyebrow. "A job?" Alice nodded. "Yes, I can't take advantage of your kindness. I want to work and be independent." James leaned back in his chair, thinking for a moment. "I actually need a secretary," he said casually. Alice's eyes widened. "What?" James folded his arms. "You're looking for a job. I'm looking for a secretary. Seems like the perfect solution." Alice gasped. "Work at Aura Group head office?" James nodded. "The position has been open for weeks. I need someone who is hard-working and trustworthy." He paused before adding, "You fit that description." Alice stared at him, overwhelmed. This job, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It would pay more than she had ever earned before. With her first salary, she would become more independent and move back to her apartment. But working at Aura Group headquarters as James's secretary, that was too much. I don't know," Alice murmured. Mrs. Ronald, who had been listening quietly, suddenly grinned. "My dear," she said gently, "you should take this chance." Alice bit her lip. "But—" "No buts," Mrs. Ronald said firmly. "You deserve something good in life. You helped me when you didn't even know who I was. Let us help you now." James watched her closely. "So what will it be?" Alice hesitated, then took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll do it." Mrs. Ronald's eyes twinkled with happiness. She had a secret plan. This job would bring Alice closer to James, and maybe, just maybe, it would change both of their lives forever. The following morning, Alice stepped into the Grand Aura Group headquarters, dressed in a simple but elegant outfit. She held her bag tightly, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. The lobby was huge, filled with marble floors and glass walls. Employees in expensive suits walked briskly, carrying files and speaking in crisp tones. She had never worked in a place like this before. As she reached the reception desk, a woman in a tight black dress gave her a cold stare. "You must be Alice," she said, eyeing her from head to toe. "Yes," Alice replied politely. The woman's lips curled in amusement. "So you're the one who got the secretary position?" Alice nodded slowly. Another employee, a woman in a red suit, whispered loudly to her colleague. "I heard she slept with the HR manager to get the job." Alice's heart sank. Another woman snickered. "Or maybe she's a secret mistress." More whispers and laughter filled the room. Alice felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to scream, "That's not true," but she held her head high and said nothing. Let them talk. She was here to work. She would prove them all wrong. Chloe, on the other hand, was furious. It was bad enough that Alice was living in the Ronald mansion, but now she had joined Aura Group, and not just anywhere. She was working directly under James. Chloe had spent years trying to tie herself to James, making sure no other woman got close. She had built an image that she was his future wife, the only woman who truly belonged beside him. And then came Alice, ruining everything. Chloe stormed through the office, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, her face twisted with anger. She needed to get rid of Alice fast. Chloe wasted no time. As a senior manager in the company, she had power, and she knew exactly how to use it. By the end of the day, rumors were everywhere. She's only close to James for his money. She must have seduced him to get this job. She's a gold-digging social climber. The whispers that had once been behind Alice's back now became open insults. When she walked into the break room, everyone went silent. Then someone laughed mockingly. "Look who it is!" One of the employees smirked. "How does it feel to climb your way to the top by sleeping with the boss?" Another worker chuckled. "Maybe I should try getting close to the CEO too." Who knew it was this easy? Alice felt her chest tighten. She wanted to scream that none of it was true, but she knew it wouldn't matter. They had already judged her, and it was all because of Chloe. The gossip reached James's ears by lunchtime, and when he found out who started it, his patience snapped. At a company-wide meeting that afternoon, James Ronald walked into the boardroom, his presence immediately demanding attention. Everyone went silent. Chloe sat at the head of the table, smug, thinking James had finally realized Alice was a problem. Instead, his piercing gaze landed directly on her. "Chloe," he said coldly. She flipped her hair, putting on a sweet smile. "Yes, darling?" James's jaw tightened. "Alice saved my grandmother's life, without asking for anything in return," he said, his voice loud and clear. "She is more of a human being than you will ever be." The room fell into dead silence. Chloe's smile vanished instantly. Alice's heart skipped a beat. James wasn't done. He turned to the rest of the room. "If I hear one more word about Alice that isn't work-related, I'll personally fire the person responsible." Murmurs spread through the employees. Chloe's face burned with humiliation. She had never been spoken to like this before. James Ronald had humiliated her in front of everyone. At that moment, Alice felt something stir in her heart. She had never had anyone stand up for her like that before. She looked at James, her eyes softening. Maybe he wasn't as cold as she thought. Chloe marched straight into James's office, slamming the door behind her. "How dare you embarrass me like that?" she shrieked. James barely looked up from his desk. "You should watch your tone, Chloe." "Watch my... James, people have always seen me as your future wife. Do you know what this does to my image?" James finally looked at her, his expression icy cold. "You should have thought about that before you started a campaign of lies against someone who did nothing to you," he said sharply. Chloe's lips trembled. "You're choosing her over me?" James sighed, rubbing his temple. "Chloe, you know we were never together." Chloe froze. "We have never dated," James continued. "I never asked you to be my girlfriend. I never gave you a reason to think we were more than acquaintances." Chloe staggered back as if she had been slapped. "So stop being possessive, Chloe," James said, his voice firm. "I have never belonged to you." Chloe's hands shook. She had spent years in his shadow, building an image of a relationship that never existed, thinking since he hadn't opposed the rumors before, it would probably become true one day. And now, with just a few words, he had shattered it completely. Without another word, she stormed out of the office, her face red with anger. As days passed, James and Alice worked closely together. At first it was just business. Alice worked hard, ignoring the stares and whispers. But then something changed. James found himself watching her more than he should. He found himself waiting for her smile. He found himself making excuses just to talk to her. And one evening, as they were working late in his office, he finally said it. "Alice," he said suddenly, leaning against his desk. She looked up from her laptop. "Yes." He hesitated for a second, just a second, then said, "Go out with me." Alice's fingers froze over the keyboard. Her heart stopped for a moment. She blinked rapidly, thinking she had misheard. "Wait, what?" James chuckled. I said, go out with me. Alice's breath caught in her throat. James Ronald, the man she had seen in magazines, the man every woman in the city dreamed of, was asking her out. She stared at him. Are you serious? James smirked. I don't joke about things like this. Alice's hands clenched into fists. I don't know if I can. This is too much. You're James Ronald. I'm just what? James interrupted. Just a girl who helped my grandmother when no one else did? Just a girl who refused money because she wanted to earn her own way? Alice's heart pounded in her chest. But what about Chloe? She asked. James reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. Chloe is the daughter of my late father's friend, he said softly. Our relationship isn't what you think. Alice searched his eyes, looking for any sign of dishonesty, but she found none. And slowly, hesitantly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. I'll go out with you. James smiled, and at that moment, everything changed. When Grandma Ronald found out that James and Alice were dating, she was overjoyed. This is wonderful news, she declared, clapping her hands together. Finally, my grandson has opened his eyes to see what is right before him. She adored Alice. From the moment she had selflessly helped her in the boutique, she had known she was special. But the rest of the world, they weren't as kind. Within days, celebrity gossip sites exploded with headlines. James Ronald, billionaire CEO, caught between two women? Is James a playboy CEO, allegedly dating his senior manager and his secretary? Chloe Williams, James's longtime companion, loses her spot to a nobody. The media frenzy painted James as a cheating playboy, and the rumors spread like wildfire. Chloe used this as an opportunity. She went to every reporter she could, pretending to be the heartbroken woman James had betrayed. Oh, James and I have been together for years, she lied in an interview. I never thought he would replace me with a... She stopped dramatically. Well, you know. Everyone understood her hidden insult. She was calling Alice a nobody, a gold digger. And Chloe's plan almost worked, until Mrs. Ronald, who was not a woman to be played with, heard about it. The day after Chloe's interview, she called a press conference in front of the Ronald estate. Cameras flashed, reporters crowded in, the world watched live, and Mrs. Ronald cleared her throat, her voice firm and strong. I am here to set the record straight, she said. My grandson, James Ronald, is not dating two women. Murmurs spread through the crowd. I want the world to know that Chloe has never been in a relationship with my grandson. She is nothing more than a family friend, Mrs. Ronald said coldly. Chloe, watching from her penthouse, screamed in frustration. But Mrs. Ronald wasn't done. My grandson has only one woman in his life, she continued, and I want everyone to know that I only have one daughter-in-law. She smiled warmly and gestured toward the side. Alice, standing nervously in a simple but elegant dress, was brought forward. I want my grandson to marry Alice, Mrs. Ronald declared. She is the kind of woman James needs in his life. The crowd went wild. Chloe's jaw dropped. Alice gasped. Wait, what? The flashes of cameras blinded her. Reporters yelled questions. James turned toward her, studying her reaction. He hadn't proposed yet, but he had thought about it, and hearing his grandmother say it out loud made him realize something. He wanted to marry her. Chloe, watching from her penthouse, gritted her teeth in rage. Alice wasn't just taking James from her. She was taking everything she had built, and there was only one person left who could stop this. Chloe picked up her phone and dialed quickly. The voice on the other end answered sharply. Chloe, how are you? Chloe forced herself to sound calm. Lady Eleanor, she said sweetly. I thought you should know. A gold digger is after your son. There was a pause. Then Lady Eleanor Ronald, James's powerful aristocratic mother, spoke coldly. Explain. Chloe smirked. Her name is Alice. She's a nobody, a social climber. She tricked Grandma Ronald into thinking she's innocent, and now she wants her to marry James. There was silence, but then Lady Eleanor's voice came through, cold and sharp. I'll be on the next flight home. Chloe smiled. Alice had no idea what was coming for her. James was in his office when his phone buzzed. Mother calling. He sighed, rubbing his head before picking up. Mother. James Ronald. He immediately knew something was wrong. I assume you've heard the news, he said calmly. Yes, and I expect you to fix this immediately, Lady Eleanor said firmly. James's jaw tightened. There's nothing to fix. Oh, really? His mother's voice was filled with disapproval. I just arrived back home, and the first thing I see is the media parading some random girl as your future wife. This is unacceptable. James's patience was wearing thin. Alice is not some random girl, he said. I love her, Mom. Chloe, who had been eavesdropping nearby, smirked. She pushed open the office door dramatically and stepped inside. James, she purred. You know what the easiest solution is? James turned to her, his expression icy. Chloe flashed him a sweet smile. Just break up with Alice, he said simply. Problem solved. James's face darkened. Chloe, he said slowly, get out of my office. Chloe's smile faltered. I was just trying to help. Get out. Chloe's face turned red, but she had no choice but to leave. As soon as the door shut behind her, Lady Eleanor's voice came through the phone again. James, she said coolly, I'm coming over to your place tonight. We will discuss this in person, and I expect you to make the right decision. The call ended abruptly. James set his phone down, his jaw clenched. That night, Alice sat alone in the garden, staring at the bright stars above. Her mind was heavy with thoughts. She was falling in love with James. She could feel it. But now his mother was back, and from what she had heard, Lady Eleanor was not an easy woman to impress. James walked toward her, his presence calming. You've been quiet, he said softly. Alice sighed. I don't want to come between you and your mother. James tilted her chin up gently, making her look into his eyes. You're not, he assured her. But what if she never accepts me? Alice whispered. James didn't hesitate. Then that's her loss. Alice's heart pounded. He cupped her face, his eyes filled with warmth. Alice, he said softly, I don't care what the world thinks. I don't care about the media or Chloe or even my mother's opinions. Her breath caught. You are the only one I want, he said. Alice felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent her whole life alone. No one had ever stood up for her like this. Later that night, James stood in his office, arms crossed, his expression serious, as Lady Eleanor Ronald stormed in. His mother was a woman of grace and power, always dressed in elegant designer outfits, her presence commanding. But today, her carefully controlled composure was cracking. James, she said sharply, closing the door behind her. What on earth do you think you're doing? James sighed. He had been expecting this. I assume this is about Alice. Lady Eleanor narrowed her eyes. You assume correctly. This girl, this nobody, has tricked you. She sees your wealth and power and is using you to climb the social ladder. James's jaw tightened. Alice is not using me, he said firmly. She didn't even want to accept my gifts. She hasn't demanded anything from me since I met her. She works hard and His mother scoffed. Works hard? Please. The only thing she's working hard on is securing a ring on her finger. James's eyes darkened. Mother, you don't know Alice, and if you refuse to give her a chance, that's on you. But I am not leaving her. Lady Eleanor clenched her fists, rage flashing in her eyes. I am your mother, James. I know what's best for you. James took a deep breath, his voice calm but unwavering. And I am a grown man, Mother. I make my own decisions. Lady Eleanor stared at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. You'll regret this, she said icily, before walking out of the office. James exhaled, running a hand through his hair. His mother was wrong about Alice, but he had no idea that someone else was planning something much worse. Chloe was losing her mind. James had never officially been hers, but in her head, he belonged to her. And now that he had chosen Alice, she had one last move left. She needed to destroy Alice completely. Late that evening, when no one was watching, She slipped into the Ronald family's private jewelry room. Inside, expensive diamonds, necklaces, and rings sparkled under the dim lights. Chloe carefully picked one of the most valuable pieces, a diamond-studded necklace worth millions, and slid it into a small bag. Then, with a smirk, she walked straight toward Alice's bedroom. The next morning, Alice was getting ready for work when suddenly the mansion doors burst open. Guards stormed in, and behind them stood Lady Eleanor, Chloe, and several members of the Ronald family. Alice's heart pounded. "What's going on?" A guard stepped forward. "Miss Alice, we need you to come with us." "Why?" Alice asked, confused. Chloe stepped forward, her eyes full of fake tears. I didn't want to believe it," she sniffled. "But we found the missing necklace. In your room." Alice froze. "What?" she gasped. Chloe dramatically covered her mouth. "I was so shocked when the maids found it. I thought you were a good person, but now I see you were only after the Ronald wealth." Alice staggered back, her vision blurring with panic. "No, I didn't take anything," she cried. The Ronald family whispered among themselves. Lady Eleanor crossed her arms. "I knew it," she said coldly. "A thief." Alice felt her heart breaking. And then, "Enough!" Everyone turned as Mrs. Ronald stepped forward, her expression calm but deadly serious. "Alice is not a thief," she said firmly. "I know this girl. She has too much integrity for something like this. We are missing something." Chloe's face stiffened in panic, but she quickly forced out a sob. "Mrs. Ronald, I know you care for her, but the evidence means nothing," she snapped. "We will investigate this thoroughly." Lady Eleanor frowned but said nothing. Alice's eyes burned with tears. She had done nothing wrong, but no matter how much Mrs. Ronald defended her, the whispers of the family, the guards, the staff, they all looked at her like she was guilty. It was too much. With one last glance at James, she turned away, packed her things, and walked out of the mansion. James tried to stop her, but Grandma Ronald gestured for him to let her go. The following morning, Alice sat in her small apartment, staring at the empty walls. She felt like she had lost everything. When she opened it, she stumbled back in shock. Lady Eleanor stood there, perfectly dressed, her face unreadable. Alice's heart raced. "Mrs. Ronald?" Lady Eleanor stepped inside, looking around with mild disgust at the small space. Then she turned to Alice, her expression calm but cold. "I came to make you an offer," she said. Alice swallowed. "What offer?" Lady Eleanor pulled out a checkbook, clicked her pen, and wrote down a number. Then she ripped out the check and placed it on the table. Alice's breath caught in her throat. $5 million. If you leave James forever," Lady Eleanor said smoothly, "this is yours." Alice's hands shook. She looked at the money, looked at Lady Eleanor. Then, with tears in her eyes, she picked up the check and tore it in half. Lady Eleanor stiffened in shock. "I love your son," Alice whispered. "But I will never take money to walk away. I am not a gold digger." For a moment the room was silent. Then Lady Eleanor smiled slightly. It wasn't a warm smile, but it was respectful. "You're stronger than I thought," she murmured. Then without another word she turned and walked out. Alice sank to the floor, tears spilling down her face. Was this the end? Back at the mansion, James had remained silent. When Alice walked out of the mansion, he had watched her leave, his chest tightening. But he hadn't stopped her, because he knew words wouldn't be enough. Alice had been wrongly accused, humiliated, and cast aside, and the only way to bring her back was to clear her name completely. So, while the world thought he had done nothing, James was already working. He reviewed every piece of security footage from that night. He spoke to the guards, the staff, the maids, and when he found what he was looking for, he knew exactly how to expose Chloe for good. That afternoon, James stormed into the Ronald estate, his presence commanding silence as he walked into the main hall. Chloe, dressed in an elegant gown, was already there, sipping tea like nothing had happened. She saw James enter and smirked. "James," she purred, standing up. "I know you're hurting, but—" "Shut up, Chloe." James cut her off coldly. The room fell silent. Lady Eleanor, Mrs. Ronald and the rest of the family were present, watching curiously. Chloe's smirk faltered. What? James's eyes darkened with fury. You framed Alice, he said sharply. You stole the necklace. You planted it in her room. Chloe laughed nervously. James, that's ridiculous. James raised a remote control and pressed play. A large screen lit up in the room. Security footage from the mansion played in front of everyone. There she was. Chloe sneaking into the jewelry room. Chloe taking the diamond necklace. Chloe slipping into Alice's room. Gasps filled the air. Lady Eleanor's eyes widened in shock. Mrs. Ronald shook her head in disappointment. Chloe's face went pale. No, she whispered, stumbling back. This is a lie. It's fake. James's lips curled into a cold smirk. Is it? A guard stepped forward. Miss Chloe, you need to leave this estate immediately. Chloe panicked. James, please. I did it because I love you. James's expression didn't change. You love power, Chloe, and you chose to frame an innocent person for it. Chloe screamed in rage as the guards dragged her out of the mansion. Her dream of marrying James destroyed, her reputation ruined, her last chance gone. Chloe Williams had finally lost everything. After Chloe was thrown out, Lady Eleanor sat silently for a long moment. Then she exhaled deeply. I misjudged Alice, she admitted, turning to her mother-in-law. She never wanted money. She never wanted status. She just wanted James. Mrs. Ronald smiled knowingly. It's about time you realized that. Lady Eleanor's lips twitched slightly. Then, for the first time, she nodded. I think, she said quietly, I'd like to speak with her again. Alice sat in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. She had refused millions to leave James. She had already lost him. Or so she thought. A knock at the door made her sit up quickly. She opened it, only to find a personal driver in a luxury suit. Miss Alice, he said with a polite bow. Mr. James Ronald has requested your presence at a private lounge. Alice's heart skipped a beat. James wanted to see her. She hesitated. Should she go? Then she remembered the way he had always defended her, the way he had always protected her. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. Take me to him. The private lounge was unlike anything Alice had ever seen. Soft golden lights, a beautiful candlelit dinner, a breathtaking view of the city skyline, and standing in the center of it all, James Ronald. Alice froze, her breath catching. He looked at her with a soft smile, one she had never seen before. Alice, he said gently, walking toward her. I've been waiting for you. Alice swallowed hard. James, Before she could finish, James did something that made her heart stop completely. He got down on one knee. Alice's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth as James pulled out a beautiful diamond ring. I don't care what the world says, James said softly. I don't care about the fake rumors. I only care about you. Alice's heart pounded. James's voice was filled with emotion. You are the strongest, kindest person I've ever met. Not only have you impacted my grandmother's life, you've changed mine. Alice's tears slipped down her cheeks. James took a deep breath. Alice, he said, will you marry me? Alice let out a shaky breath. Then with a small, tearful smile, she whispered, yes. James's eyes lit up as he slid the ring onto her finger. Then in front of the beautiful city lights, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her like she was his entire world. Alice had lost everything before, but now she had found something greater. She had found love. The moment Alice and James's engagement was announced, it spread like wildfire. Breaking: billionaire James Ronald engaged to ex-boutique assistant. The modern Cinderella story. Alice, a simple girl, wins the heart of the country's richest CEO. Who is Alice? Everything we know about the woman James Ronald chose. Social media exploded. Some people cheered for Alice, praising her kindness and humility, but no one was more shocked and bitter than Maria. She was fixing her makeup at the boutique when she saw the headline flash across her phone screen. She froze, staring at the words, Alice engaged to James Ronald, the same Alice she had humiliated and fired. Maria's hand trembled, the lipstick falling from her grip. "No," she whispered, "that's impossible." Her mind raced. How had this happened? How had the girl she looked down on, the girl she had mocked and bullied, ended up winning everything? Before she could process it, the doors of the boutique swung open. James and Alice walked in. The boutique fell silent as the staff stared in shock at the couple standing before them. James, tall and powerful, held Alice's hand, his presence commanding respect. Maria's throat went dry. Alice was dressed elegantly, her engagement ring glittering under the lights. The same girl Maria had once treated like a nobody. Now she was the future Mrs. Ronald. Maria forced a smile, her voice overly sweet. "Mr. Ronald, Miss Alice, what an unexpected surprise." James's eyes narrowed coldly. "I came here for one reason, Maria," he said, his voice sharp as a blade. Maria swallowed hard. "Oh, of course, sir. Anything." James crossed his arms. "You insulted my grandmother. You looked down on people because of their appearance. You bullied an employee who did nothing wrong." Maria's face paled. James's voice hardened. "I would have fired you a long time ago, but I wanted to tell you myself." Maria's heart dropped. "You're fired," James said coldly. "And let this be a warning. Discrimination and bullying will never be tolerated in my company." Gasps filled the store. Maria staggered back, her vision blurring. This was it. She had lost everything. As she watched Alice and James walk away, Maria finally remembered Mrs. Ronald's words. Kindness is more valuable than expensive clothes. For the first time, she realized she had ruined herself with her own arrogance, and there was no one to blame but herself. While Alice and James continued planning their wedding, another storm was brewing. Chloe, now desperate and full of rage, was not done yet. Though she had been disgraced and thrown out, she still had one last weapon, her position at Aura Group. Using her managerial access, she hacked into the company's financial records. She leaked confidential reports, exposing sensitive business deals and investor contracts to the press. Her goal, to destroy Aura Group. If she couldn't have James, she would ruin him instead. The scandal hit the media instantly. "Aura Group in crisis. Major financial data leaked. Is James Ronald's empire about to fall? Who is behind the biggest corporate breach of the year?" Chloe smiled, watching the chaos unfold, but her victory was short-lived because James was already tracking her down. Chloe was celebrating in her apartment when she heard it. A loud knock at the door. Her heart pounded. She slowly opened it and froze. James stood there, his face icy. Behind him, 2 police officers. Chloe's smile vanished. "James," she stammered. "What a—" James tilted his head, his voice cold. "You thought I wouldn't find out?" Chloe stepped back, panic creeping in. I don't know what you're talking about." James held up his phone, showing evidence of the hack, traced directly to Chloe's account. "Game over," he said. The officers stepped forward, placing handcuffs around Chloe's wrists. She screamed, "No! You can't do this to me! I love you!" James's expression did not change. "You don't know what love is, Chloe," he said simply as the officers dragged her away. Chloe's world crumbled completely. She had lost for good. The day after Chloe's arrest, Lady Eleanor sat quietly in the Ronald mansion, reflecting on everything. Alice had been humiliated, framed, and tested, but she had never broken. She had refused money. She had walked away with dignity, and most importantly, she had never once tried to change James. Lady Eleanor finally realized Alice was exactly the kind of woman her son needed. That evening, she called Alice into the sitting room. Alice sat nervously, waiting for another confrontation. Instead, Lady Eleanor looked at her with calm eyes. "I misjudged you," she said softly. Alice blinked in shock. "My son is truly lucky to have you," Lady Eleanor admitted. "And I hope that one day you will allow me to be part of your life as well." Alice's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, Lady Eleanor had accepted her. She stood up and hesitantly wrapped her arms around James's mother. Lady Eleanor stiffened at first, then slowly she hugged Alice back. James, watching from the doorway, smiled to himself. Alice had won over everyone, and now nothing stood in the way of their happily ever after. The day of Alice and James's wedding arrived, and it was nothing short of legendary. It was the biggest event in the country, drawing in royalty, billionaires, dignitaries, and the world's most elite celebrities. Cameras flashed as luxurious cars and limousines arrived at the Grand Cathedral, where the ceremony was set to take place. The floral arrangements alone cost millions. The chandeliers glittered like diamonds, and the guests were treated like royalty. But nothing compared to the woman at the center of it all. Alice, dressed in a custom-made couture gown, she stepped out of the luxurious bridal car, her gown flowing like a river of stars, encrusted with pearls and diamonds. A tiara rested on her head, one specially designed for her, a symbol that she was no longer just a simple girl from nowhere. She was now Alice Ronald, the future queen of high society. As she walked down the aisle, everyone rose to their feet, gasping in admiration. The same people who had once mocked her, the same colleagues who had whispered behind her back, were now cheering for her. And at the end of the aisle, James Ronald stood waiting. His eyes were locked on her, his heart pounding. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and today, she would become his forever. As the ceremony neared its final moments, Mrs. Ronald stepped forward. The entire hall went silent. In her hands, she held a small antique box. "Alice, my dear," she said warmly, looking at her with pride. "From the first day I met you, I knew you were special. You showed kindness when no one else did. And today you are not just marrying my grandson. You are becoming part of our family." She opened the box. Inside was a rare, priceless heirloom, a golden brooch encrusted with sapphires, passed down for generations in the Ronald family. "This," Mrs. Ronald continued, "belongs to the woman who will carry our family's legacy, and today I give it to you." Alice's eyes filled with tears as she pinned it to her gown. "Welcome to the family, my child," she said. The guests erupted into applause, but the most important gift was yet to come. As the reception began, James took Alice's hand and led her to the center of the ballroom. "I have something for you," he murmured, his voice soft but firm. He reached into a velvet box and lifted the most stunning diamond necklace anyone had ever seen. Gasps filled the room. It was called the Ocean Front, a masterpiece of rare blue diamonds. The necklace was valued at $30 million, a piece of jewelry fit for a queen. Alice's breath caught in her throat. "James, this is too much," she whispered. But James gently placed the necklace around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin as he fastened it in place. He then looked into her eyes, his voice deep with raw emotion. "You are the only woman I will ever love," he said, his voice steady, "and my love for you is as deep as the ocean." Alice's heart pounded. A tear slipped from her eye, and James gently wiped it away. "You changed my life," he continued. "You gave me something money never could. A reason to love." Alice threw her arms around him, whispering, "I love you too." And then James kissed her. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise, a declaration, a new beginning. The entire room erupted in applause, fireworks bursting outside, the world celebrating their love. Among the crowd, Alice's former co-workers stood watching in absolute shock. Maria, the senior staff. Everyone who had once looked down on her, now they cheered for her. The nobody they had mocked was now the most powerful woman in high society. And at the edge of the ballroom, watching it all unfold, stood Mrs. Ronald. She smiled, her heart full of pride and satisfaction. Alice had proven her worth, and now she would be forever loved. As the music played, and Alice and James shared another kiss beneath the glowing chandeliers, Mrs. Ronald chuckled softly to herself. "Good things happen to good people," she whispered, "and Alice Ronald would have a love story for the ages."